Whipping the mind to make it work turns out not to be so useful for creating peace. When not to do the work. Are there ever times when it makes sense not to do the work? I can think of several. Let's look at a few of these. The first is when the emotion is really strong. I love the work because my perspective often changes enough that my emotions shift from stressed to peaceful. But sometimes the emotion is so strong that I don't actually want to do the work. And this happens from time to time. I'm so angry that I just want to be angry. And even the thought of doing the work can make me angrier because I don't want to turn it around. I don't want to ask, is it true? I don't want to. I'm just angry. Can I just be angry? So, should I push on through this or hold back when emotions are strong? For me, pushing through feels like the opposite of the very spirit of the work, which is to listen to myself. It feels like I'm using the work to get rid of the emotion. And that feels disrespectful to the angry part of me that's suffering. It's like saying, hey, get over it, which is not really very helpful. The stuck part of me feels not listened to. It feels disrespected. It feels belittled. And it starts to feel unsafe. I don't want to turn it around. It becomes an internal fight. And what happens is I stop trusting the work. I stop trusting myself because I am my own best facilitator. And if the emotional part of me can't trust the part of me that is facilitating, the part of me that's inviting me to do the work, then I'm kind of in this place where like I don't want to do the work because I don't feel like you're listening to me or that I'm being heard or that I'm just going to be said to get over it. So if that kind of situation comes up, that might be a time when I might not do the work. So what are the options in case this does happen, which does happen from time to time? When the emotion's really strong, what are some other things that I find helpful? Well, the first thing is I don't do the work. I just write my stressful thoughts down. This, on the other hand, instead of trying to turn it around or try to go through the four questions, just writing the stressful thoughts down feels like listening. I'm actually giving my ego, my stuck self, my stress, a chance to be heard. And so I like to even forget about that I'll ever do the work on these thoughts, maybe never. And um, I just want to hear what's stressing me. And I actually find this very soothing. I find that emotional part of me wants to get out. So let me let it out. And what better way to do that than onto paper where it's not going to hurt anybody, it's not going to mess up my life, and I still will have that feeling of getting hurt. So later I might do the work on those statements. I often do, but I have no requirement and I'm not trying to twist myself into doing the work, kind of trick myself. I'm just saying, let's just release this stress onto paper and be heard. And that's, I find very helpful. So, another thing that I find helpful when emotions are really strong is sometimes I do have enough openness to do the work. So I may do the work, but I've got so much charge going on that I will end up spending a lot more time in question three. And question three is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? This question is great for allowing me to rant and rave a bit and to see what it actually feels like to believe the thought. If I give more time for this question, I will often notice how stressful it is to believe the thought. I actually see the effect of believing that thought. And that often starts to release my attachment to the thought. Like, I'm right, I'm angry. I start to see, like, whoa, this thought is causing me a lot of stress. So maybe thinking that thought is not in my best interest. And even the stuck part of me starts to feel like, oh, well, maybe I could become ready for question four, which is, who would you be without the thought? So that's one approach, is to do the work, but spend a little more time in question three when the emotion is strong. And then finally, when the emotion's really strong and I don't want to do the work, I may simply do something else completely. Um, I may simply not be open to questioning my thoughts at this time. So I do other things that balance me. I go for a walk, go for a swim, do some yoga, play some pickleball, I talk with a friend, read a book, watch a movie, sleep, anything like that. It can be actually very relieving to feel free not to fix myself, but to just take care of myself instead. Openness is the only prerequisite for doing the work. If I'm not open, I don't do it. It's as simple as that. This feels like I'm listening to myself, which is the very essence of what the work is all about. It feels honest. Now, I love to do the work, but forcing myself to do it can give me a bad taste for the work. Not to mention that in that very closed state, it's almost impossible to find genuine examples and answers to the questions. So, what's the point? I'd much rather wait until I'm open again and feel attracted to the work instead of using force on myself. Force just doesn't work in this area. So, a second kind of situation when I may choose not to do the work is when resistance is really strong. Sometimes people have strong doubts about the work, and it can come up for all of us. So, forcing against these doubts can actually be counterproductive. Instead, what I do and what I recommend to people is to bring your doubts about the work to a trained facilitator. Like I offer these open sessions for that. You can bring any question about the work, including anything that you think is like crazy about the work. Bring it. Let's talk about it. Let's look at it. And I find that way more productive than just forcing myself to kind of bear bear down and go through the work, even though I think something's not good about the work. So bring your doubts, question them. But you can also question your doubts yourself. And I love doing that. I love taking my kind of resistance thoughts, putting them on paper, and then doing inquiry on those before ever going in and doing the work on whatever else is bothering me. I have to feel safe. And if I feel like the work isn't a safe place, then I need to do the work on the work so that I come to a place of better understanding and comfort with that before I go in on anything more deep. So, a third scenario of when I may not do the work is when I'm beating myself up. If I ever notice that I'm beating myself up when doing the work, and that means making myself wrong or shaming or blaming myself, especially in the turnarounds, then I stop. This is not actually the work anyway. What the mind is doing is taking the kind of format of the work and using it to its own, end, which is doing what it's always done, which is either beating myself up or taking what was an attack on someone else and just kind of ricocheting it back onto myself, which is just as violent as what I was doing when I was blaming someone else in the first place. So the work is a gentle process, but sometimes the mind is in attack mode and it swings from attacking someone else to attacking itself instead of looking for how the two opposites actually balance each other out. That's what the work is. Like it's a gentle balancing of opposites. And if I can't manage that because I just keep flipping to blaming them and then blaming me and then blaming them and blaming me, then that's a time when I wouldn't do the work. Or that's a time when I would reach out to a facilitator where someone with a lot of experience in the work can hold me and allow me to be a little gentler with myself as I'm going through the process. Okay, so a fourth scenario when I might not use the work is using the work to hide out. Now, this is an interesting one. The work is a tool for self discovery. But the mind can use any tool as a way to stay stuck, even the work. And if you notice that, check it out. Are you turning things around to kind of take the edge off of pain that would actually be better dealt with by taking courageous action? Then this is like using the work to hide out. Like I should be taking this step, which is scary for me, and I'm just saying, "Oh, I should take this step. Is it true?" And they're like, "Oh no, maybe I don't. I shouldn't take this step," and I can use it to kind of hide out. So there's no right answers, but notice, what does it feel like? There are always two dimensions for finding wiggle room, and that's on the inner dimension and then on the outer dimension. So, are you focusing on finding inner wiggle room at the exclusion of finding outer wiggle room? Why not explore both and question the resistance thoughts to doing either? So, I think that's a common spiritual path misconception in all kinds of spiritual traditions is people seekers are often thinking, I will just do only the spiritual practices and forget about anything, any kind of action in the world. I'll just do the spiritual because that's the more important, and I'll just focus on that. And what happens is they end up not dealing with things that could easily be dealt with on the material level. So why not do both? They're not mutually exclusive. Here's an example of this. Um, let's say I want to say no to someone. And if I'm open-minded in doing the work, I can question the thought I want to say no to them and find that it's also true that I don't want to say no to them. Like, especially if it's stressful, I want to say no to them and I'm feeling like I really have to, I need to, I want to. So when I find the turnaround, I don't want to say no to them, it can be freeing because I'm actually feeling less attached now to saying no to them. Maybe I won't ever find the courage to say no, um, or I see other reasons not to say no, and I can still be okay. So this is the inner wiggle room, right? I'm okay with not taking the courageous action. Okay, good. It's fine. I'm not as attached to it now. I could also do the work on the reasons why I don't have the courage to say no. So this is another kind of work. And if my mind's open, I will go there. For example, I don't have the courage to say no to them because they won't like me, right? So this is doing the work with an open mind, desiring to look at all sides of the situation and then including taking courageous action. So that's opening up this room for the outer wiggle room where I can actually act and do things that are scary to me, but actually feel like they're freeing to me to actually do. But on the other hand, if I come to the work with a semi closed mind, desirous of hiding out, I would use the work to justify not saying no to them. I might question, I want to say no to them, and use my examples as reasons not to stretch, as reasons to stay safe and hide out. This same mind would probably also avoid questioning any resistance thoughts to saying no, and it's just not open to all sides of the exploration. So, in that way, it uses the work as a shelter instead of as a way of stretching. Don't become a work fanatic. Instead, listen to yourself. That's what the work is all about anyway. And if yourself is asking for you to not do the work right now, pay attention. That is your work. That is your turnaround. Can you live it? When I hold the work gently and lightly, I find it to be very attractive. But if I hold it with force, I resent it. I prefer to trust the inner wisdom that leads me towards it sometimes and away from it sometimes. There's a lot of freedom in that. And I'll end with a quote from Byron Katie from her book, A Thousand Names for Joy, which is one of my favorite books that she wrote. This one that I happen to be doesn't have to look like anything but what it is. It can afford to be a fool.